Hello and welcome all. Today we will discuss about Gestalt psychology. The whole is different from the sum of its part. Now we will discuss about its origin and its meaning as a whole. Gestalt psychology, meaning of Gestalt as a whole. Gestalt can be pronounced as Gestalt, is a German word that means shape, form or essence. Gestalt is a psychology term which means unified whole. It refers to the theory of visual perception developed by German psychologists in 1920s. One of the most important theories of perception is the Gestalt theory, which was developed in 1910s by Max Vorheimer and was carried on by Wolfgang Kohler and Kurt Kofka at the Frankfurt University. Now we will understand about the founding fathers of Gestalt theory. Max Vorheimer. He was born in April 15, 1880 in Prague, Czech Republic. He was the father of Gestalt psychology. He died in October 12, 1943. Next is Wolfgang Kohler. He was born in January 21, 1887 in Reval, which is now Tallinn in Estonia. He is a psychologist and a phenomenologist, and he is another one of the founders of Gestalt psychology. Next is Kurt Kofka. He was born in March 1886 in Berlin, Germany. He was a psychologist and a learning theorist, and he was another one of the founding fathers of Gestalt psychology. Now we will understand the conclusion that was given by these three researchers. Max Vorheimer, Wolfgang Kohler and Kurt Kofka concluded that learners were not passive but rather active. They suggested that learners do not just collect information as it is, but they actively process and reconstruct the data according to their understanding. This is also known as perceptual process. Certain factors impact on this perceptual process, like experience, need, attitude, and one's present situation. Now we will understand about Gestalt psychology's principle: law of proximity, law of similarity, law of closure, law of continuation, law of figure or ground, and law of good pregnancy. We will understand in detail about these laws. First, it's the law of proximity. Law of proximity states that when objects appear close to one another, they tend to be perceived as group, as you can see in the figure. As we have shown the example of law of proximity, we can see that different humans concede to make an image of a tree, and different food products make the logo of food mobile. Next one is the law of similarity. The law of similarity captures the idea that when we look at objects that are similar to each other, we tend to group them together. We are prone to notice matching shapes, color and forms. Our brain quickly identify pattern faster than the separate parts of the pattern. As you can see in the figure, there is certain type of pattern shown. As the example of law of similarity, we can easily see that the fruits and vegetables are laid out in a pattern that we can identify easily and can visualize. Next is the law of closure. The law of closure captures the idea that when we see incomplete elements in a visual, our brain tend to fill the gaps and see it as a whole. As we can see in the shapes, that we can easily identify the shapes, but they are not complete. This is the example as the panda is shown in the figure. Our brain is completing the image of the panda. The image of giraffe and the design written, they are also faded from different areas, but we can identify them easily. Next is the law of continuation. The mind continues visual patterns, the eye continues in the direction it's going, and the principle of continuity predicts the preference of continuous figures. Example of law of continuation: as we can see, a rope is going through the Gestalt ladder. We can see that it's going throughout whole the ladder, and as we can see in the pattern. Law of good pregnance. The word pregnance is a German term which means good figure. So simply we can refer it to good figure or law of simplicity. This law holds the objects in the environmental that are seen in the way that makes them appear as simple as possible. As we can see in the figure, we can easily identify the triangle and the square. As in the example of good pregnancy, we can easily identify three figures. In another example, we can easily identify circles. And here we can easily identify circle and the puzzle pieces. Next is the law of figure or ground. Figure or ground organization is a type of perceptual grouping which is vital necessity for reorganizing objects through vision. As in the figure, when we see, we can see a vase, but when we see closely, we see other things. Here is another example of law of figure or ground. We can see a girlish figure in the example, but when we tilt our devices, we can see that someone is going down the mountain. As in the other figure, we can see some pillars, but if we see the dark patches, we can see there are some persons standing to each other. Now, insight learning. Wolfgang Kohler was the first psychologist who developed the insight learning, in which he described an experiment with apes that could use boxes and sticks as tools to solve the problem. In his experiment, he hung a piece of fruit just out of the reach of each chimp. He then provided the chimps with either 2 sticks or 3 boxes. Then he waited and watched. In the first scenario, ape is trying to solve the problem by sticking smaller stick into longer stick to create a very long stick, which could be used to knock down the hanging fruit down. In the second scenario, the chimps would solve the problem by stacking the boxes on top of each other like a ladder, which allowed them to climb the top of the sack and reach the fruit. So, in this experiment, Wolfgang Kohler learned that important aspect of learning was not only reinforcement but the coordination of thinking to create new organizations. Kohler referred to this behavior as insight or discovery learning. Insight learning is the abrupt realization of problem solution. Insight learning is not the result of the trial or error, responding to an environmental stimulus, or the result of observing someone else attempt the problem. It is a completely cognitive experience which requires the ability to visualize the problem and the solution internally in their mind or eyes, so to speak, before initiating the behavioral response. These are the basic implications of the Gestalt principle in teaching and learning process. Now you can know that Gestalt principle are not just mere principle of visual drawings but also illustrations. First, we discuss about law of proximity in our teaching process. Related concepts or lessons could be taught aligned or closely to each other. This is the reason why subtraction is taught after addition, multiplication after subtraction, and division after multiplication. Law of similarity. Similar lessons or content should be grouped together to make learners develop understanding more efficiently and effectively. This is the reason why similar lessons are grouped into units. For example, unit 1 is for human body and unit 2 is for energy and motion, and so forth. Third one is law of closure. So when a concept or topic is incomplete, that is not closed, incomplete information may make learners want to discover what's missing rather than concentrating on the given instructions. If students find a math algorithm confusing because a certain question is left unanswered or a step isn't clear, they will tend to concentrate on that confused part of the process rather than the total process as a whole. This is why students get lost in solving such kind of problems. Thus, make the lesson complete. Present it clearly, simply, and always be ready for student clarifications. Next is law of continuation. Lessons should be presented in such a way that learners will see these are connected and continuous. Now you know why we have the review part of the lesson plan. This way, student will realize that their new lesson is actually has continuity and it is related to what they already know or to the previous lesson. Next is the law of good pregnance. Pregnance state that when things are grasped as a whole, the minimal amount of energy is exerted in thinking. So, in short, make your lesson holistic, complete, and most of all, simple. Law of figure or ground. For a figure to be perceived, it must stand out from the background. Emphasis should be done on important aspects of the lesson. For example, teachers should vary their tone of their voice or write boldly or underline the important keywords of the lesson on the blackboard. These are the information sources that we used. These are the images sources. Hindi narration is done by Prithviraj Samta. English narration is done by Udit Kumar. Editing Udit Kumar. Department of Journalism. Center of Excellence, Government Degree College, Sanjoli. Thanks for watching.